We get started there, I want to give a big thanks to Shell that have made this event and these conversations possible. And without further ado, it is now time for a View from the Top segment. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Colette Hurstess, who is the president of Shell USA and executive vice president for the Gulf of America. Welcome, Colette. And also Rick Talent, who is executive vice president of supply chain, contracting, and procurement. Come on up, folks. So a question to both of you to get started. As we look across the sort of energy landscape today and into the future, sometimes there are conflicting interests, or maybe competing priorities is a better way to think about it. So how do you balance and prioritize something like energy security versus Shell's economic strength and the societal benefits and impacts that you deal with every day?
Yeah, good question, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. When I think about energy security, really what we need to have in place is reliable, affordable, economically viable energy for our customers, and for the growing demand base that we see. In Shell, we're working to be the world's leading integrated energy company, and that really translates to a few things that we need to do exceptionally well and to meet those challenges. What that is to continue to grow our integrated gas and LNG business.
Make your microphones over.
Yep. To continue to grow our integrated gas and LNG business, to sustain our liquids production, and continue to determine how we can do that with less emissions. And then the third is to really transform the downstream part of our business, and that includes renewables and the customer-facing side. And all of those things we need to do with more value, delivering more value with less emissions overall. So that's how we think about the dilemma and how we really look at the balance that we need between those different elements.
Yeah. And then, Rick, is it fair to say it's that integration point that's key to the security?
No, it is. It's great because in my role, I have the unique opportunity to see across the supply chains and across the businesses of Shell itself. And it's not a dilemma. Actually, I think it's an opportunity when you think about energy security, but also environmental or less emissions. I'll give you an example. We're building Holland Hydrogen 1 right now in Rotterdam, next to our Pernis refinery. That's actually an electrolyzer that creates green hydrogen that's powered by offshore wind. And of course, then that hydrogen goes into our Pernis refinery to decarbonize the products that we have in Pernis and provides energy for Europe. And so I think the opportunity is there. So when we talk about the dilemma or the trilemma, I think could be some win-wins. The biggest challenge you have then is, again, the affordability. And that's where public policy comes in together. That's where supply chains and scale come in, the technology, and of course the international collaboration that goes with that.
Now, Colette, you've been focused on one of the hardest parts of the business, building the deep water business, but you're now a leader down there in the Gulf. What was the most impactful part of your strategy that's gotten you to this point?
Yeah, so our offshore business, and my background is in geology. So what that means is looking at the rocks that are underneath the water and deep inside the earth, and determining where the natural resources sit and what's the best way to get them out. You know, there's a whole lot of prediction that's associated with that. It requires a certain amount of technical rigor and excellence, and that's one of the important elements that's needed. Shell has been a leader in deep water for more than 40 years, and really it's an industry that we created. And so all that expertise that is required has now translated into our midstream business, where we have more than 3,400 miles of pipeline that evacuate more than 70% of the products from the Gulf onshore and ultimately to our customers. And then we service more than 7 million customers a day from our 12,000 service stations across the US. The United States is really a significant attraction of capital for Shell. It attracts more capital to this country than any other country that we operate in globally in the world. And really that has to do with the exceptional opportunities that exist here. We're pretty disciplined with how we deploy our capital and what we expect to get from that. All that translates to really an advantaged position that we have And as a whole, what we're looking to do is continue to deliver value to our shareholders and products to our customers that are the products that they want and need to continue, living their everyday lives.
And do you see changes in those products? Like when I think of what consumers want from energy, they want, one, they want it to be there. Two, they want choice in how they get it. Is that how you view it as well?
Yeah, and I think that customer choice is an important aspect of it. And we know that what that looks like if you're sitting in Oklahoma may look slightly different than what it looks like if you're sitting in New York City or here in Washington, D.C. And so making sure that customers have access to the form of energy that they choose is key.
Yep. Now, we just heard Jeremy from ClearPath talk about permitting as a big problem or one of his big bugbears at the moment. From Shell's perspective, what is needed to unlock more investment in the energy sector?
Yeah, and very similar thought process overall. So one of the key things that we need is reliable permitting. And there's an opportunity to have bipartisan permitting reform that can create much more of an attractive environment here in the U.S., much more of a competitive environment for different companies like Shell to invest in. And the lead times for many of our projects can be decades long. So having an environment that has predictable regulatory...
That's the key word, isn't it?
Predictable.
Not just speed, but also predictable.
Predictable, competitive, and also, because that's how we'll get the capital and attract it, and responsible. I mean, that's the type of place where companies like Shell want to invest. And right now, there's a great opportunity. Permitting reform will unlock all forms of energy across our country.
Then beyond permitting, is there anything else that you're doing or you want government support on to accelerate energy development? Or would you rather be left alone once the permitting is sorted?
I mean, there's always there's always another ask.
Don't be shy. This is the audience to ask.
There's always another ask. I think that access is a really important aspect to what we're looking for. If you think about how we produce in the Gulf of Mexico, the way that I describe it is a conveyor belt. And we need to continue to feed the front end of the conveyor belt in order to have the products that drive the growth of our country every day.
Rick, can I bring you in? I'm a bit of a supply chain nerd, so I'm very happy to have you up here on stage. I think we all generically know about the importance of robust supply chains now. We've had that experience through COVID and whatnot. But can you tell us, what role specifically does the robustness of the supply chain play for a company like Shell? And then what do all the players in the supply chain need to do to make sure we really have a robust supply chain?
I think it's $1 million question there. Huh? So a couple of things. Energy security and energy supply chains go hand in hand. And so if I step back and look at Shell's supply chain, there's many supply chains in that. Of course, we have to get molecules from point A to point B. We have to work with our suppliers to build big LNG plants or platforms offshore in Colette's business. But we also have a supply chain that does things like mobility stations or fuel stations. We sell 500 million cups of coffee every year. I didn't know that till I got into this job. And so there's a whole supply chain around coffee in Shell, which is quite incredible. But all of that has to come together. Supply chain is a kind of a fickle thing. It needs to be predictable and it needs to be stable. If you think about the supply chains that we built in the US, they've been built up over generations. It's not something that just happens overnight. And so lots of hard work has gone into it. And Shell's been at the forefront of that complexity working through that. And as you said, there have been disruptions. I think supply chain now is in vogue when it comes to a terminology in our industry. Of course, we had COVID, which there was no playbook to figure out how to manage COVID. But then you've had tariffs, you've had inflation, you've had geopolitical tension, you've had Russia, Ukraine. We've had boats go sideways in the middle of the Suez Canal. Who could have imagined that a couple of years ago? And so you have to be much more resilient as well in terms of what your supply chain looks like. What I would say to make supply chain work, it's a team sport, right? And so it's not just Shell making sure our supply chain works. It's the public policy, it's the predictability that comes with that. But it's also building the scale that we need so our suppliers can put their investment to make it work. And so when Colette talks about a conveyor belt of opportunities in the Gulf of America, we need a scale as a business to be able to create the suppliers so they have enough to be able to invest in the supply chain. So what I would say supply chain, what is needed, it's public policy support to give predictability and the scale to be able to optimize and control cost.
Yep. Now, follow-up question there. Supply chains often are global in nature. So you're a global company.
Yep.
Energy is a set of global markets. It's not just the US. So what needs to happen to ensure US competitiveness in those global markets and that you've got the best shot possible to take a slice of the action?
Yeah, I mean, so I always say that the US ecosystem is incredible. I mean, when it comes to financial capital, when it comes to ingenuity, capability, but also the framework that we have around our policies. In general, the US can actually excel when it comes to any energy policy. We also have the resources and the brainpower. Again, it comes back to that predictability. If you create a predictable environment where we know the rules of the game, then the investment comes, and that's what we need in the US.
We're getting down to our final minute. I think it might be time for one fun thing.
Okay.
Colette, my family are big fans of Jazz Fest in New Orleans, and I found out backstage that you were instrumental in reviving that festival. Can you give us any insights on what's coming up for the future of Jazz Fest?
Yeah, so maybe a few thoughts about Jazz Fest. And I sit here with probably one of the second biggest fans, or two of the biggest
right.
fans
Equals,
for Jazz
equals,
Fest.
right.
That's right, that's right. So after Hurricane Katrina, Jazz Fest is a cultural event that happens in New Orleans, and it's a big part of our community, of our culture. Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005. It was 2006, it was January, and the idea that this festival was going to be able to take place was really hard to imagine. Shell stepped in and was the first corporate sponsor ever of the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, and we've continued to this day. So it's been 20 years since Hurricane Katrina. This will be our 20th year sponsoring the event. If you haven't come, you should. It's a fabulous time. And it's really a moment of pride that we get to continue to sponsor this really important event within our community.
That's all we've got time for, but get your tickets to Jazz Fest 26, folks.
Yeah.
Colette, Rick, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.